A very good evening to you and welcome to the Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day. I'm Frances Hurd and we start with the number of the day. Unfortunately, technical glitches in the system. We can't bring it up, but I can tell you it's 1.25 billion rand. The number of the day, 1.25 billion rand. This is the least amount already available in a solidarity fund to combat the economic impact of the coronavirus, COVID-19. The solidarity fund was announced by the president last night. So there you can see the least amount. It was kick-started by donations of 1 billion rand each from the Rupert and Oppenheimer families. So that accounts, in fact, this should be 2.25 billion. We've got the 2 billion plus 150 million in seed capital from Treasury and the National Lotteries Commission. The fund will be chaired by Gloria Serobe and Adrian Enthoven. Earlier today, other ministers spoke about the aim of the fund to alleviate the suffering and distress caused by the virus and mobilize the support of business and civil society. Of course, it is small businesses and their workers that could be hardest hit by the 3-week national lockdown announced by the president last night. Trade and Industry Minister Ibrahim Patel said donations were coming in and businesses will be contributing within the next few days. So we'll see this fund being augmented. Patel has outlined shedding more light on the Industrial Development Corporation's Solidarity Fund. Let's take a listen.
President Cyril Ramaphosa announced several key measures to ensure that businesses don't go under during the 21-day lockdown. These include funds pledged by various departments to curb the economic impact of the virus. The IDC, together with the Department of Trade and Industry, pledged a 3 billion rand fund for industrial funding. This funding package will be used to assist vulnerable firms and to fast-track funding for companies that are critical to fighting the virus and its economic impact. The government will be releasing more information on these measures over the next couple of days.
This facility will be available to South African-owned businesses, and there are some elements to it. The first is a special intervention of 500 million rand that is allocated for trade finance to import essential medical products. The second is a 700 million rand facility for working capital, equipment and machinery. We're also addressing surges in demand to ensure food security is prioritized.
President Ramaphosa's newly announced Solidarity Fund was welcomed by the private sector, which has already pledged its support to the fund with financial contributions. This includes the Rupert and Oppenheimer families' pledge of 1 billion rand each to assist small businesses and their employees affected by the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, Business Unity South Africa said they and all business bodies unreservedly endorsed the Solidarity Fund. Balentle Mthethwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Let's get more. Following the announcement of a 21-day lockdown to halt the spread of coronavirus, President Ramaphosa's executive spent today explaining the nitty-gritty, the economic cluster, briefing the media on government's interventions.
Given the rapid spread of the coronavirus in South Africa, a lockdown of 21 days will be in full swing from Thursday midnight. South Africa has been faced with a tight budget even before COVID-19, with the staggering economy taking a definite hit, trying to fill in all the necessary fiscal measures. The government reassures the country that there is money to fill the gap.
Slicing off some budgets that are clearly not going to be spent. I can tell you now as an example. If you look at what's going to happen on the travel budgets across the departments, in national departments we have about, on average, on a monthly basis, spend about 280 million. That 280 million won't be spent for domestic and international travel. So effectively, that means that money will have to be reprioritized. So that 100 million, for instance, is coming from such programs. And as he said, the 50 million is coming from the lottery. So there is money in the system currently that's not going to be, and we are reprioritizing to specific COVID-19 programs.
Trade and Industry Minister Ibrahim Patel offered a better understanding of banking services, which will be conducted during the 21-day lockdown. while also making clear that more information will be provided soon.
On competition exemptions for banks, on Friday we issued an exemption for banks under the Competition Act to coordinate on measures which can be used to support businesses and ordinary account holders, ordinary citizens during this period. It was published in the Government Gazette yesterday. The exemptions will allow banks to work together to devise programs and relief measures which can help small businesses and consumers as well as firms in distress through these financial and economic challenges. In particular, the exemptions will enable the banks to coordinate on matters like payment holidays and debt relief for business and individual citizens subject to financial stress.
Small businesses, entrepreneurs and students will get a payment holiday from the banks for a maximum period of 6 months. The economic cluster certainly has its work cut out as National Treasury points to growth, possibly going into negative territory this year. But the department has offered some reassurances that the necessary funding will be available if more is required. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so we're asking tonight, can the South African economy withstand a 3-week lockdown? To discuss, we're joined via Skype by the founder and CEO of 10X Investments, Stephen Nathan. Stephen, thank you for being with us tonight. Do you think we've even starting to understand the economic implications of this?
Well, obviously, as individuals, we are coming to terms with it. But if you look at the financial market, they tend to look 12 to 14 months forward. And the financial markets have been telling us for a few weeks now that there is a big economic disruption coming. If you look at the JSE, that market is down over 30% year to date. But it's not only the JSE, the US markets, European and Asian markets are all down 30% in a very, very short time. So the financial markets have anticipated that. We've seen weakness in the rand and other emerging market and export-led currencies, countries with commodity exports. So we are in this economic storm, and it is a reality for all of us, and we have to deal with it as decisively as possible so we can get over it.
Yeah, we don't know when. I guess that's part of the uncertainty. Looking at the markets, are you one of those who advocate for people to actually go in, to use this opportunity to buy and not join the selling spree right now?
Yes, listen, it's always easy to tell people to buy. The question is who has cash available. So certainly if you haven't invested and you're able to buy great companies at 30 or 50% less than they were 1 or 2 months ago, then that is a wonderful buying opportunity on the assumption that if it's 6-12 months' time, we return to a normal environment, then you're picking up great companies at incredibly low valuation. For retirement savers, people in pension and provident funds, there it's important to take a long-term perspective, and you're a long-term investor. And ironically, as an investor, you're still buying shares. Every month, the contributions we put in, we're buying shares. So it's actually better to be buying shares when prices are low than when they're high, even though we feel poorer and we psychologically feel like we are investing in a falling and poor market.
What about pensioners right now, people who rely on previously saved monies? I mean, how hard has the hit been, if you can generalize?
Yeah, so you'll probably get two kinds of pensioners. One that are actually getting an annuity from a life insurance company, and that annuity is not based upon the market environment. So they should be fine. In fact, they'll be sitting quite pretty because they typically get an inflation-linked increase not related to the stock market. Those pensioners that invest in a living annuity where they are taking investment risk and drawing an income off their capital, they definitely are a lot poorer today. But once again, we saw this in 2008 where the stock market more than halved, and it took about 18 months for that to recover. And those pensioners, those people in living in annuities that tapped through it, they were able to be better off 2 years later. So it really is a situation that it's very difficult to time the market. And if you've got the right investment strategy, you need to stick with it and be a little bit prudent in how much income you would draw down if you are in a living annuity.
Yeah. Part of the market stress has been about South Africa's finances in the first place. We've already got a recession. We're facing a possible downgrade by Moody's this week. Is there enough of a buffer to get through this?
Well, as you say, South Africa has enormous challenges without COVID-19. But the interesting thing from a stock market and a currency perspective is that we're behaving very much in line with other countries. So it's not as though we are being specifically punished, even though we are entering this on a much weaker footing. So the financial markets, in a way, have been kind to us because they've given us similar treatment to other countries, despite the weaknesses and the challenges we have. And hopefully, this will spur government and the private sector to make tougher decisions than they probably wouldn't have otherwise made, because we do have such a disadvantage.
Yeah. Well, government is talking about redirecting funds. Of course, there's a solidarity fund as well. Businesses, society can contribute. But do you think that's possible to move around from one department to the other? Enough funds required to get South Africa through this?
It's going to be very difficult. And, the government has the luxury of being able to print money. Not that that's always a good thing. So we probably can survive this, and certainly moving money around to the right places and getting them out of the wrong places. Allocating spend better and more efficiently to benefit all citizens is something I think the government has not done very well over the last 10 years. So sometimes it takes a crisis in order for us to make decisions that seem really tough. In normal circumstances, they seem much more straightforward. And also, if we can have greater cooperation, as we've already seen, I think we're all very proud of what the president has done. And if government can unify labour and the private sector more, and it takes a crisis to do that, in the long run, if we look beyond this and we look to our children, and we take a 10, 20, 30-year view, hopefully we can get some good coming out of a very challenging time.
Yeah. Finally, Stephen, what do you expect from Moody's? What is the market expecting?
Well, no one knows. If you look at the economic environment and if you look at government debt and our budget deficits, they've only been getting worse over time. So, Moody's seems to be this monkey on our back that we keep on referring to. They've been quite kind to us because our finances have deteriorated. It's very difficult for us to think on their behalf, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if and when we do get a downgrade. It seems to be priced into most financial markets. So I think if it came, we wouldn't expect any lasting impact. There's much bigger forces at play. COVID-19, our low economic growth, our rising unemployment, our rising budget deficit. There's far bigger factors at play than what one credit rating agency says about our debt.
All right, and how things have changed. Of course, there used to be this obsession about Moody's. That was the founder, by the way, and CEO of 10X Investments, Stephen Nathan. Thank you very much. And Moody's is set to deliver a pronouncement on our credit rating. Many expecting a downgrade, worried about South Africa's debt. Of course, that'll get even worse with COVID-19. Let's talk about more support mechanisms trying to deal with the economic impact of this coming lockdown. Details of the Unemployment Insurance Fund's new disaster national benefit will be announced tomorrow. The benefit is aimed at paying workers who stand to lose their incomes because of business closures due to the lockdown.
Many workers are now preparing to stay at home over the next 3 weeks as part of the national lockdown to limit the spread of the coronavirus. But for many others, it will be work as usual.
Remember that a large cohort of the workers will remain at work in the emergency services. You're talking about medical, security, and some industries, and what has been called the essential services. You're talking the police, the firefighters. You're also talking about those who are dealing with water supply, the sewage and sanitation. You're talking about the ICT, data centers, the fiber ones. You're also talking about those who are dealing with the generation, transmission, and the distribution of electricity, because these are called essential services, because if interrupted, this would endanger life.
For those who happen to contract the coronavirus while on duty, the Department of Labour's Compensation Fund will cover their medical expenses. And if they don't make it, their dependents can claim compensation from the fund.
For those who fall ill as a result of work, they will be covered by the Compensation Fund or the Compensation Act.
Many of the workers who do not fall under essential services will be forced to stay home with no pay. The government says not to worry, they are going to get paid from the Unemployment Insurance Fund.
Tomorrow, we'll be making detailed announcement, including how this is going to be administered. Remember that we're talking about millions of workers who are going to be claiming from the UIF.
Minister Ngwese says government is still working out how unregistered workers who don't contribute to the UIF and neither to their employers can be accommodated. Bongani Muchwa, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, it was a much better day on the markets as the United States offered stimulus measures that boosted the mood across the world. The U.S. Federal Reserve announced yesterday it would buy an unlimited amount of U.S. Treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities to boost the economy and combat the economic effects of COVID-19. In response, our own rand strengthened today after several days of weakening, and the JSE rose by 7.5%. Let's take a look at your main financial indicators. Right, and that was the bottom line, a wrap of the business news of the day. On to all things sporting with Tsepiso Makwetla, and the biggest cancellation of them all, I guess.
Interesting use of the word.